What happened to Delver's Drop? Delver's Drop was a Kickstarter game that was initially set to release in October of 2013 under the studio Pixelscopic. The Kickstarter launched in February of 2013 and it had an initial goal of $75,000 and ultimately doubled that goal on March 13, 2013. Delver's Drop was a dungeon crawler roguelike, not unlike The Binding of Isaac, but had puzzle elements reminiscent of the early Legend of Zelda games, in particular A Link to the Past and the Minish Cap. It had, in my opinion, beautiful graphics, and the idea of the game was simple but fun. The idea was to draw from floor to floor, solving puzzles, and it was supposed to have characters and classes and special abilities and weapons you could find and different enemies to fight, your typical roguelike thing. A simple enough premise, but a lot of fun and a lot of promise as an indie game. Delver's Drop never had a full release. Delver Drop's Kickstarter page is still up for public viewing. Fans and backers of the project still ask questions to this day of what happened to the game. There are questions on Steam forums, as the game did get greenlit on that platform. There are questions on the Kickstarter page, or questions on really any social media platform dating all the way back to 2014, with no real response from the developers. The final update on the Kickstarter page, titled Good Tidings and Teamwork, is dated November 30th, 2017. That's 3 entire years of no updates, no words from the developers. But their comments regarding questions on the Kickstarter date as recently as May 28th, 2020, but we'll come back to this later. So, where are the devs now? I decided to do some digging, but there's hardly anything to go off of. Pixelscopic's LinkedIn page still exists, and it lists 3 names. Ryan Baker, listed as the creative director, Justin Terry, listed as the level designer / puzzle designer, and Nathan Reynolds, who is apparently efficient, amiable, and passionate. Seems like a nice guy. I couldn't find much on Baker or Terry other than personal Facebook pages, but messaging a personal account seemed like a bit much for the scope of this video. Luckily, Reynolds has a website for his art as well as a Twitter page. Turns out he was at least one of the artists for Delver's Drop. Unfortunately, he hasn't updated his website since May 6, 2018, and he hasn't tweeted since August 3, 2019. He did like something on August 22nd, but it's not useful information for our purposes. He does, however, have a contact email on his website. I sent an email inquiring into whether he'd be open for questions about Delver's Drop and mentioned I wanted to make a video on it. As of the writing of this video, he hasn't responded. In an interview done with Sprites and Dice, the Pixelscopic team had this to say on the time and budget decisions for Delver's Drop. We looked at how much time and manpower we would need to complete the game and set an estimated budget based on that. We also looked at and compared a lot of similar Kickstarter campaigns to gauge how much funding we thought Delver's Drop would be able to bring in. And yes, the funding has allowed us to work on the game full time, but we've also had to buy some additional hardware and software. Getting funded above and beyond our goal has given us a lot of flexibility to bring in a few more contractors and provide them with computers so that we can create more content than if we had been funded for less. In this same interview, 2 names are mentioned that I hadn't come across before. Kobe Utter, the co-founder and engineering director, and Ryan Burrell, the director of technical design. It seems strange to me that these names aren't mentioned on the LinkedIn page, especially the co-founder, but I guess LinkedIn isn't for everyone. But this brings up a larger point. Pixelscopic's lack of transparency given this process is somewhat astounding. Some might even say impressive if it weren't infuriating. Why not have some kind of connection with the backers and the development team? Even if it was just one person. I understand that you're an independent game studio that is trying to kind of get their first game off the ground, but when you're taking people's money and the one place where they can communicate with you is on the platform where they're giving you their money, don't you think there should be some kind of connection there? The only names that are ever mentioned on the Kickstarter page itself, where the backers are able to communicate with the team behind the project, are in the November 2017 update, where they mention they're bringing on 2 new team members, Brandon and James. Brandon, who has worked on games before, and James, who likes fighting games and thus wants to work on the game's combat, and also wants to bring the colorblind awareness to the game's UI. These are both fine in principle, but now we have a team of at least 7 people, assuming they didn't have to cut anyone from the team, working on the game full time, as said in the Sprites and Dice interview. That's a lot of money required to make a game, especially given the initial time period of 8 months within which the game was set to release. Since that 8-month period had already passed 4 years prior to this, I assume they brought these contractors on to finish the game as soon as possible. Given that Brandon and James were brought onto the team in 2017, how much money could they have had left to hire them and give them new equipment? They mentioned they needed to buy new hardware for their new team members as well, which is extra funds lost. Keep in mind, this interview was done in August of 2013, so they clearly had some ideas of how to budget their time and money. I guess that didn't last long. In the same interview, they mentioned that they developed their own engine. Developing your own engine on limited funds is a big risk. My guess is that they were intending to use this engine for future games, but given the history of Delver's Drop and Pixelscopic, I'm not so sure that will ever come to fruition. So, remember when I said I'd come back to those 2020 responses? Let's do that. On May 11th, 2020, Pixelscopic responded to a disgruntled comment on their Kickstarter page, stating that, "It's just been a very long road to work through our many development hurdles. We understand that many have forgotten or written off the game, but we are working to get the game back to a point where it will rebuild the original excitement and deliver on its promises. We know that communication is a part of that process and that backers want to hear from us. And we're truly trying to return the development process to a state where we can get back into a regular update cycle." As exciting as it is to hear that the game is still in development, why didn't they update the backers with the game's development for nearly 3 whole years? I understand there's a fear of people wanting a mass refund, but given that you're able to give these vague PR answers, you could have done that here as well. Why do they have to try to return the development process to where we can get back to a regular update cycle? Backers don't need a regular update cycle as long as there are some updates. Pixelscopic can respond to comments from backers every month with the typical PR stuff, vague answers, avoiding questions, and so on, but they can't tell us what happened? When I first had the idea for this video, I was going to end it in speculation, something along the lines of, here's what could have happened. But when I found out the game was still in development, the answers to the questions surrounding the game seemed pretty clear-cut. Delver's Drop was supposed to be a small, procedurally generated roguelike, but got backed with a lot of money, reaching most of their stretch goals and thus extending the time needed to develop the game. But using a custom engine, the team likely found a lot of issues in development that took a lot more time to solve than if they had used an engine that already existed. So they hire contractors in order to help with these issues. All of that extra time needed to work on the game, combined with the limited funding given how much time has passed since the game was supposed to be released, and the extra contractors, we have a very likely answer. The team didn't know how to budget their time, and therefore, their money. They ran out of funds, I assume, at some point in 2017, and didn't want to disappoint their backers. But that begs the question, why not update everyone on what really went on? Did you run out of funds? Did people leave the team? Did you have to fire someone? What kind of troubles did you run into? What is the actual state of Pixelscopic and Delver's Drop? The updates didn't have to be consistent or even large. But hearing anything is so much better than hearing nothing. Updates twice a year would have been better than this. All in all, it's disappointing. Delver's Drop seemed to be made with a lot of love from people who played video games and wanted to make something great. But a lack of experience resulted in time loss, money loss, and what we have is, as of right now, a 7-year delay. No communication between Pixelscopic and its fans has resulted in discontent, and releasing Delver's Drop in the year 2020 or 2021 or really any time in the future will be bittersweet. The game will likely not hold up to the standard of video games we hold today, given how much time they've had to develop it, though I'd love to be proven wrong on that. All I can hope for is that this serves as a lesson, not only to other developers hoping to get into independent video game development, but to the staff of Pixelscopic. I hope they aren't dissuaded from making video games because of the development process of Delver's Drop. May your future endeavors end more graciously than this one. If you would still like to support Delver's Drop, the link to the Kickstarter and the developer's website will be in the description. Thanks for watching, and if there is a next time, I'll see you then.